There's a fantasy people cling to about the end of the world. It's in every prepper forum thread written at 217A. In every post-apocalyptic blockbuster where the hero stands alone in an empty downtown street, wind blowing dramatically through discarded newspapers that somehow survived the firestorm. The fantasy is this: when society collapses, the city becomes silent and empty, yours for the taking. A concrete kingdom waiting for a bold survivor with a backpack and a superiority complex. That's not what happens. When the power grid coughs once and dies, when the traffic lights blink their last confused yellow and surrender to darkness, when the refrigerators hum their final lullaby and go still, the city does not become empty. It becomes crowded, just not with the species that built it. Within hours of human systems shutting down, the shift begins. It's subtle at first. You won't notice because you'll be busy panicking about bottled water, canned beans, and whether your neighbor Steve is finally going to snap and start trading aggressively. But while you're inventorying rice and ammunition, something else is inventorying you. Because humans are not the only creatures who have been living in your city. We've just been the loudest. For the last century, urban ecosystems have been held in a kind of biological chokehold. Poison cycles reset monthly. Trash disappears on schedule. Storm drains are flushed. Buildings are sealed. Predators are pushed out. We engineered a world where other species survive only in the margins, in the cracks of the pavement, the spaces between walls, the dark corners beneath our feet. Remove maintenance. Remove sanitation. Remove constant human pressure. You don't get emptiness. You get resurgence. Garbage trucks stop running. That alone is enough to rewrite the food chain. Every alley becomes a buffet line. Every restaurant kitchen left to rot becomes a 5-star tasting menu for anything with teeth and patience. Every dumpster transforms into a long-term investment portfolio of calories. No health inspector, no closing time. Within 30 days, your city will belong primarily to 4 animals. They were already there. They were waiting. And whether you live comfortably, get sick, get hunted, or become a feverish cautionary tale depends entirely on how well you understand them. Let's start with the first one. The one most people pretend isn't a big deal until it's chewing through their last bag of rice. Rats. Not the cute cartoon kind with chef hats. The real ones. The gray-brown shadows that have been living beneath your daily commute for years, memorizing your trash schedule better than you ever did. Under normal conditions, rat populations are suppressed by 4 things: poison, sanitation, predators, and limited food access. Remove all 4 simultaneously, which is exactly what a systemic collapse does, and you don't get gradual growth. You get biological acceleration that feels like a glitch in reality. A single breeding pair of rats, under favorable conditions, can theoretically produce thousands of descendants in a year. That's not an exaggeration. That's math. Fast reproduction cycles. Large litters. Early sexual maturity. It's the kind of efficiency that would make a Silicon Valley startup founder cry with envy. In the first week after collapse, the rats test the air. They venture further from sewer lines and crawl spaces because the vibration of footsteps and the thunder of engines are gone. The city gets quiet, and quiet is safety. By week 2, refrigerators are warm, pantry doors are open, grocery stores are unsecured, and every abandoned apartment becomes a calorie mine. The explosion of available food triggers faster breeding cycles. Biology doesn't waste opportunity. By week 3, you start seeing them in daylight, not darting frantically from shadow to shadow, but moving with purpose. In groups, confidence grows quickly when the apex predator disappears. By day 30, in some areas, populations may have doubled or tripled, and they are still scaling up. Now here's where the romantic lone survivor fantasy collapses under the weight of epidemiology. Rats are not just hungry mouths. They are mobile disease platforms. They carry fleas that historically transmitted plague. Their urine can spread leptospirosis in contaminated water. Their droppings can harbor hantavirus particles. They track salmonella across surfaces like microscopic graffiti artists. They can transmit rat bite fever through direct contact. In the world you grew up in, these are treatable inconveniences. In a world without hospitals, IV fluids, or antibiotics, they are lethal plot twists. And here's the part most people underestimate. Rats will find your food before other humans do. They can smell it through walls. They can chew through wood, plastic, insulation, and soft metals. They can flatten their rib cages and squeeze through gaps barely wider than a coin. That tidy stack of protein bars in your duffel bag? To a rat, that's a treasure chest with a flimsy lock. If your food storage system is designed only to hide from people, it will fail against rats. Cloth bags are useless. Thin plastic containers are a joke. Cardboard might as well be an invitation. In a collapsed city, food must be sealed in metal or thick glass with tight lids, elevated off the ground, suspended where possible, stored with obsessive sanitation around it. Because contamination is as dangerous as theft, a few droppings in your rice supply can turn your survival stash into a biological hazard. This is where the psychological adjustment begins. You're not just competing with other humans. You're competing with a species that operates 24 hours a day, doesn't negotiate, doesn't get tired, and reproduces faster than you can set traps. And the traps? They won't reset themselves anymore. Here's the darker layer. When rats thrive, ecosystems shift around them. Predators may follow. Scavengers adjust patterns. Parasites multiply. Every rat that dies becomes a host for fleas seeking new blood. And in a city now full of stagnant water and uncollected waste, those parasites don't just vanish. They relocate. That's the real mental shift. In modern life, you were buffered by systems so efficient you barely noticed them. Public health programs, pest control cycles, sanitation workers, invisible guardians, holding back biological chaos. When those systems disappear, nature doesn't politely wait for you to adapt, it advances. And if you think this is just about being grossed out, you're still thinking like someone who expects a hospital to exist next week. In a collapse, your immune system is now frontline infantry. A small infection is no longer a minor inconvenience. Dehydration from fever isn't something solved with a quick pharmacy run. Every illness is amplified by scarcity and stress. Your body is running on limited calories and elevated cortisol. That's not peak performance mode. Rats don't need to attack you directly to end your story. They just need to contaminate the wrong surface. So the first lesson of the animal takeover is simple and brutal. Seal everything: food, water, trash, your shelter perimeter, your ego, because the city isn't empty. It's reorganizing. And the rats are just the opening act. Now here's the twist nobody expects. Not every animal that takes over your city is your enemy. Some of them are watching for you. Look up. While you're scanning doorways for hostile survivors and checking alleyways for movement, there's an entire intelligence network perched above you, hopping along roof lines and light poles like unpaid surveillance contractors. Birds, pigeons, crows, and whatever urban raptors have been quietly nesting on skyscrapers this whole time, pretending they're not apex predators in a concrete canyon. The average survivor ignores birds. They feel decorative. Background noise. Feathery NPCs in the open-world game of collapse. That's a mistake. When humans disappear from daily routines, birds react immediately. They are exquisitely tuned to movement patterns. For decades, they've learned how to read us when we feed them, when we chase them, when we ignore them. Remove the predictable rhythm of commuters, cars, and crowds, and their baseline shifts. And that shift is visible. Imagine you're observing from the fourth floor of an abandoned office building. You're not moving. You're quiet. 2 blocks away, a flock of pigeons explodes into the air all at once. That didn't happen for fun. In an empty city, mass takeoff is usually triggered by disturbance. A moving human, a predator, something large and out of place. You just gained information without stepping into the street. Birds broadcast disruption. Crows are even better. Crows don't just react. They analyze. They remember faces. They communicate. If a crow identifies a threat, it produces a specific alarm call. Other crows respond. The sound cascades outward, block by block. It's not random noise. It's structured warning. Learn the difference between casual crow chatter and alarm vocalizations, and you've tapped into a citywide early warning system that runs 247 without batteries. Most people in a collapse will be hyper-focused on scanning visually. That's exhausting and risky. Exposure kills. But listening? Listening costs nothing. There's an eerie advantage in standing still and letting the birds reveal motion for you. And then there's the practical side nobody likes to talk about because it makes them uncomfortable. Food. Pigeons are protein. Yes, you'll hesitate at first. Years of urban conditioning tell you they're dirty, that they're rats with wings. But here's the uncomfortable truth. In a collapsed food system, your preferences are a luxury item. A single pigeon provides a couple hundred calories of lean meat. Multiply that by several birds from a known roosting site, and suddenly you have a renewable protein source that doesn't require farmland, fertilizer, or livestock infrastructure. Urban pigeons have lived alongside humans for generations. They're not terrified of us the way wild birds are. They gather predictably under bridges, on rooftops, in parking garages, near high ledges with wind protection. Once you identify a roost, you have a repeat location. Simple traps work. A box propped with a stick, a loop snare, patience, efficiency over heroics. The key is energy economics. In survival, you never burn more calories acquiring food than the food provides. Birds in dense urban populations are one of the rare post-collapse protein sources that still obey that rule. Crows are different, harder to catch, smarter than you, but they serve another function. They cache food. Crows hide scraps in crevices, under debris, inside gutters. If you observe where they're caching, you're reading a map of available calories in the environment. They're showing you which areas still contain edible waste, open containers, or overlooked stores. You're not stealing their stash, you're decoding their pattern recognition. This is where psychology matters. In modern life, most people don't pay attention to ambient information. We walk with headphones in, eyes glued to glowing rectangles, insulated from environmental signals. In a collapse, that habit becomes lethal. You have to rewire your attention span. Think of birds as living motion sensors and resource indicators. Their behavior tells you when someone is moving nearby. Their clustering tells you where food might exist. Their silence can be just as important as their noise. And then there's the raptors. Hawks and falcons have already adapted to urban environments. They nest on high ledges, hunt pigeons and rodents, and operate from vertical dominance positions you can't reach. If you see increased raptor activity, it often correlates with rodent surges. That tells you something about the rat population in your area without you ever lifting a sewer grate. Patterns matter. Here's the part where modern satire sneaks in. Right now, if the grid failed tomorrow, a surprising percentage of people would still be trying to film vertical videos explaining the apocalypse to followers who no longer have electricity. Hey guys, day 3 without Wi-Fi. Make sure you like and subscribe to my survival journey. Meanwhile, a crow is broadcasting their location to every other crow in a 3-block radius. Nature has no interest in your personal brand. It responds only to movement, food, and vulnerability, and birds are brutally honest about all three. There's also a social layer. In a human-free zone, birds grow bolder. They occupy streets more confidently. Their flight paths change. Their feeding windows expand. If you notice pigeons calmly feeding in a particular intersection at noon, that likely means human movement there has been minimal. Bird behavior becomes a proxy for human absence. Flip that around. If birds are consistently avoiding a specific area, something is disturbing them regularly. That something might be another group of survivors, or a predator, or a feral dog pack establishing territory. Which brings us to the third animal, dogs. This one is complicated. In the first week after collapse, many of the dogs you encounter will still be pets. Confused, hungry, waiting at doors that won't open, following scent trails that end in chaos. These dogs are not immediate threats. They are disoriented domestic animals whose routine just evaporated. Approach slowly. No direct eye contact. Food extended, Calm posture. If you secure one or two early before hunger and fear reshape them, you gain an extraordinary asset. A bonded dog is a biological sensor array. Their hearing range exceeds yours. Their sense of smell makes yours look fictional. They detect movement and unfamiliar scent long before you can visually confirm anything. A dog stationed near your shelter entrance will alert to approaching humans or animals at distances your ears cannot manage. The psychological deterrent alone, the sound of a barking dog, can redirect opportunistic threats toward easier targets. In a world without electronic surveillance, a dog is a security system that runs on scraps and loyalty. But here's where reality hardens. By week 2 or 3, unclaimed dogs begin forming loose groups. Hunger accelerates bonding through necessity. Social instincts re-emerge. Domestication suppressed pack behavior. It did not erase it. A group of 5 to 10 feral dogs is not a cinematic inconvenience. It is a coordinated predator unit. They test boundaries. They circle. They probe for weakness. Especially at dawn and dusk, when visibility drops and scent tracking improves. A solo human carrying food is not at the top of that hierarchy. And dogs learn fast. One successful, coordinated hunt reinforces pack aggression. It teaches them that teamwork produces meat. By day 30, established packs become territorial. They patrol. They mark. They avoid large human groups but may shadow individuals. This changes how you move. Low-light travel becomes riskier. Food carried externally must be sealed to reduce scent. Route planning needs to account for known dog territories the same way you'd avoid hostile human zones. So the strategic window is narrow. Secure companionship early or prepare to navigate predator territories later. And while you're calculating that, remember, the rats are still multiplying, the birds are still broadcasting, and the city is still reshaping itself around your shrinking dominance. You are no longer the automatic apex. You are a participant. Now we talk about the animal that makes people smirk, the one that doesn't look cinematic, doesn't snarl, doesn't travel in dramatic slow-motion packs under a blood-red sunset. The mosquito. I know, you're imagining wolves reclaiming highways, bears wandering through shopping malls, maybe a mountain lion lounging in a Starbucks drive-thru. That's the apocalypse your brain finds exciting. But statistically, the creature most likely to end you in a post-collapse city weighs less than a paperclip and sounds like a faulty headphone wire near your ear. Here's what happens when infrastructure fails. Storm drains stop flushing, gutters clog, abandoned swimming pools lose chlorine and become stagnant ponds, toilets sit full, buckets collect rainwater, tires in junkyards trap moisture. Every discarded soda can becomes a tiny reservoir. And in a city of 1 million people, there are millions of these micro-containers. Under normal conditions, mosquito populations are aggressively managed. Vector control programs spray, drain, monitor, and treat breeding grounds. Public health departments track outbreaks. All of that is invisible to you until it's gone. Without intervention, mosquito breeding becomes exponential. Warm temperatures accelerate life cycles. Eggs hatch, larvae mature, adults emerge in waves. In some species, the process takes less than 2 weeks. You don't notice at first. A few extra bites, mild annoyance. Then the density climbs. Even in modern cities with functioning infrastructure, mosquito-borne illnesses exist. West Nile virus, dengue, Zika, Eastern equine encephalitis. In certain climates, malaria re-enters the picture. These diseases are kept in check, not because mosquitoes are weak, but because systems are strong. Remove the systems. Suddenly, a mosquito bite isn't an itch, it's a biological lottery ticket. In the pre-collapse world, if you develop a high fever, you go to a hospital, you receive fluids, antivirals, monitoring. In a collapse, fever equals dehydration. Dehydration equals weakness. Weakness equals vulnerability. If encephalitis develops brain inflammation, there is no ICU waiting. No neurologist on call. No ventilator humming in the background. A creature that fits on your fingernail can remove you from the survival equation quietly and without drama. The exposure window is predictable, dusk to dawn. That's when you're stationary, radiating carbon dioxide and body heat, the two things mosquitoes track with relentless efficiency. Sleeping unprotected during warm months becomes one of the highest risk behaviors you can engage in. A mosquito net stops being camping gear. It becomes medical infrastructure. Improvised netting can be made from sheer curtain fabric, window screens, fine mesh. It doesn't have to be pretty. It has to be sealed, tucked, secured. Covering exposed skin during peak hours matters. Lightweight long sleeves, gloves if necessary. Smoke from small controlled fires near entrances can help deter swarms. Eliminating standing water within a 200-foot radius of your shelter reduces local breeding pressure. And here's where the ecosystem interlocks in ways most people never consider. Remember the rats? Rats die. They decompose. Fleas abandon cooling bodies in search of new warm hosts. Mosquitoes feed opportunistically in contaminated environments. The denser the rat population, the more organic waste accumulates. The more organic waste accumulates, the more microbial and parasitic cycles accelerate. Disease vectors don't operate in isolation. The rat problem feeds the parasite problem. The stagnant water feeds the mosquito problem. The mosquito problem feeds the human disease problem. In modern cities, sanitation infrastructure quietly interrupts these feedback loops daily. Trash removal, water treatment, pest control, they are the unsung guardians preventing epidemiological chaos. When they vanish, the loops close. And the speed of that closure is shocking. There's also a psychological trap here. Humans are wired to fear large, visible threats. A feral dog pack triggers adrenaline. A human with a weapon triggers planning. A mosquito triggers annoyance. That mismatch between perception and danger is lethal. Your brain says minor inconvenience. Reality says vector-borne illness in a system without medicine. This is where discipline separates survivors from stories. You may feel ridiculous, draping mesh over your sleeping area while the skyline burns in the distance. You may feel overly cautious covering your skin in humid heat. But survival is not about aesthetics. It's about probability management. Now, zoom out. Within 30 days, your city's biological hierarchy has reorganized. Rats have infiltrated food chains and contaminated surfaces. Birds are broadcasting movement and mapping resources. Dogs have split into companions and coordinated predators. Mosquitoes have transformed warm nights into exposure zones. And here's the part that doesn't get enough attention. All of this happens while human survivors are still arguing about generators and ammunition. There's an irony here that borders on comedy. For decades, we designed cities to suppress wild systems so effectively that most people forgot they existed. We paved over wetlands. We sealed buildings. We sanitized relentlessly. Then we built entire cultural identities around being prepared for collapse. Yet most survival plans focus on stockpiles, weapons, and interpersonal conflict, not ecological succession. But collapse isn't just social, it's biological. The city you knew was an artificial equilibrium maintained by constant energy input. Remove that energy, and entropy doesn't politely knock. It floods. So what does a smart survivor do? They adapt behavior before necessity forces it. They seal food in metal or glass containers and elevate it. They maintain ruthless sanitation inside and around shelter. They monitor bird patterns daily, using them as passive reconnaissance. They secure dogs early before packs form and integrate them into perimeter defense. They treat mosquito control as seriously as water purification. They understand that illness is often more statistically dangerous than violence. They reduce scent trails. They avoid predictable movement at dawn and dusk in known dog territories. They listen more than they move. They treat every standing puddle as a potential nursery of disease. And they shift their identity. You are no longer the ruler of the city. You are a temporary resident negotiating with species that have been waiting decades for your dominance to falter. This isn't about fear, it's about clarity. The apocalypse won't just test your fire-starting skills and your aim, it will test your ecological awareness, because the animals are adapting whether you are or not. Let's stitch it all together. 30 days after the grid fails, your city doesn't look like a ghost town. It looks like a transfer of ownership. The billboards are still up. The skyscrapers are still standing. The highways still cut across the landscape like concrete arteries. But the systems that made all of it safe, sterile, and human-dominant are gone. And into that vacuum rush the species that were never truly gone, just suppressed. Rats have infiltrated supply lines. Birds have turned the skyline into a surveillance network. Dogs have chosen sides, ally or adversary. Mosquitoes have weaponized humidity. And here's the uncomfortable truth. None of them are evil. They're not plotting. They're not malicious. They're efficient. Nature doesn't care about your nostalgia for Wi-Fi. It responds to opportunity. The survivors who thrive are the ones who stop seeing animals as background scenery and start seeing them as strategic variables. Food storage stops being about hiding from looters and becomes about creating barriers against teeth and contamination. Metal containers with tight-fitting lids, thick glass jars, suspended storage using wire instead of rope. Clean floors, no crumbs, no scraps, waste sealed and removed from sleeping areas. Because if you give rats calories, you're not just feeding rodents, you're funding a disease network. You learn to observe birds, not as noise, but as data. A sudden synchronized takeoff, 2 blocks east, means movement. Repeated alarm calls traveling across rooftops means something is traversing territory. A rooftop, consistently covered in pigeons, suggests low disturbance. An area birds avoid suggests high activity. You let them scout for you. With dogs, timing is everything. Secure one early, before hunger reshapes it. Build trust. Establish routine. A bonded dog becomes a living alarm system, detecting scent signatures long before you notice them. The sound of a bark carries authority in an empty city. It signals that someone is alert inside. But delay too long, and the equation flips. Feral packs don't hate you, they just see you as another organism moving through territory with calories attached. Dawn and dusk become periods of tactical awareness. Solo travel becomes a calculated risk. Food scent becomes something you manage deliberately. You don't anthropomorphize them. You respect their capabilities. And then there's the mosquito, the silent statistic. Mosquito netting over your sleeping area. No exceptions during warm months. Long sleeves at dusk, even if you feel overdressed. Smoke barriers were appropriate. Standing water eliminated with almost obsessive thoroughness. Because the most dangerous enemy in a collapsed city isn't always the loudest. It's the one that introduces infection quietly and lets dehydration do the rest. There's a deeper lesson here that goes beyond tactics. Modern society insulated you from consequence. You left trash out, and it vanished. You ignored stagnant water, and someone treated it. You swatted at a mosquito, and if you got sick, a hospital intervened. Systems absorbed your mistakes. In collapse, systems disappear. Consequences remain. And this is where psychology matters as much as supplies. You have to train yourself to see the small things, the droppings in a corner, the pattern of birds at noon versus sunset, the shift in dog vocalizations at night, the increase in mosquito density after rainfall. Observation becomes survival currency. There's a reason experienced disaster responders talk about situational awareness like it's a muscle, because it is. And most people let it atrophy in the age of curated feeds and climate control. Imagine 2 survivors with identical stockpiles. One seals food casually, ignores bird behavior, assumes dogs will stay friendly, sleeps without netting because it's uncomfortable. The other integrates the ecosystem into every decision. 30 days later, one is fighting fever with limited water and contaminated supplies. The other is tired, cautious, but stable. Supplies matter. Ammunition matters. But ecosystem literacy multiplies the value of everything else. Here's a final irony. Before collapse, we like to think we were separate from nature, that cities were somehow immune to ecological rules. That concrete insulated us from biology, but cities are ecosystems, dense ones, complex ones, held together by constant energy input and human coordination. Remove the coordination, the ecosystem doesn't vanish. It recalibrates. And you are either an informed participant in that recalibration or you are biomass feeding it. So remember the 4 relationships. The rats want your food. Deny them access and deny disease a foothold. The birds want nothing from you. Watch them. Listen. Let them reveal movement you'd otherwise miss. The dogs want structure. Become part of their pack early or avoid theirs later. The mosquitoes want your blood. Interrupt their breeding grounds and shield yourself from their reach. 4 animals, 4 negotiations. The person who understands all 4 doesn't just survive longer. They move through the city with clarity. They know that when pigeons explode into the air, something is coming. That when crows scream in sequence, a threat is traveling. That when the dog growls at an empty street, it probably isn't empty. That when rain collects in broken gutters, disease is incubating. Pay attention to the animals. Because while you were busy building the illusion of control, they were studying the city you built. And when the lights go out, they don't panic. They adapt. The only question is whether you will.